This session is all about pulses. Pulses were very important in the ancient world as a source of protein. There was very little vegetarianism on moral or animal rights grounds, but most people wouldn't be able to eat meat on a regular basis, so they'd be getting most of their proteins, as I said, through eating pulses. Some of the most important pulses were, as they are today, lentils, beans, chickpeas and peas. The beans were rather different from the beans we have nowadays. Nowadays, most of the beans we have, the haricot beans and their relations, come from America, so they weren't available to the Romans. The Romans' main bean was the broad bean. But we're going to start off with a lentil recipe. This is from a 6th century medical writer called Anthemus. He's very late in the sequence. He's about the latest writer on Roman food that we have, but his writing is based on what he calls his authorities, who were the Roman medical writers who went before him, the Roman and the Greek tradition. And I'll be cooking these recipes in an ordinary pan, but in the Roman world, a lot of the time you'd be using a cooking pot, quite often an earthenware cooking pot. We archaeologists find hundreds and hundreds of these on site. They do tend to break very easily, particularly if you're not taking a great deal of care of them, of how you use them, because they do tend to break if they're badly treated because of the stresses that they come under when they're used directly on a fire. Some lentils were found in Chilean, and they came from a deposit of burnt material from a storehouse. Most of it was grain, but some of it was lentils, which were probably imported because the climate isn't really suitable in Britain for growing lentils. Put 225 grams or 8 ounces of green or red lentils in the pan and cover them with water so that it comes up about an inch or 2.5 centimetres above the top. And put it on the heat and allow it to come to the boil. It's now come to the boil, so we're going to put in the seasonings. We want a coriander plant, complete with root, which has the best flavour. This is an old one which is going to seed. A little bit of salt. And a tablespoonful of oil. I think we need a little bit more hot water. And then we just leave it to cook. How long you leave it depends on how you like your lentils. If you like them chewy, you might be able to get away with 20 minutes, but I like them soft, so that's at least 40 minutes. Check from time to time to ensure they're not boiling dry. If they are, add a little boiling water. Right, now that's the end of 40 minutes, and we remove the coriander. And I think we actually want to add a little bit of water into there just to give a bit of extra lubrication. To make it easier to mix in the spice, which is sumac, still popular in the Near East, and it has a slightly sour, earthy flavour, and we want 2 teaspoons. Be careful because it stains. And a dash of vinegar. Stir that round. And serve. Our second recipe is for peas, and these aren't the modern garden peas, they're split peas which you can still buy for making pea soups. And the ones I'll be using are the yellow split peas, which have been completely dried before they are harvested, unlike the green split peas which are harvested in a sort of more semi-ripe condition. We need to soak those before we start because this cuts down the cooking time very considerably. You can cook them from the dried state, but it takes a lot longer, so it's much more efficient in terms of your time and your fuel to cook them after you've soaked them. As you can see, the peas have expanded quite considerably, and we're going to drain them. And put them to cook. With more water. By the time they finish soaking, they should be soft enough to break. If they aren't, it's probably because they've been in store too long, and you will need to put a pinch of bicarbonate of soda in this first cooking water, and then after it's come to the boil, pour it off and replace with boiling water. While we're cooking the peas, we'll also boil the eggs. They will take 10 minutes after the water's come back to the boil. Cool the eggs by running cold water over them. As you can see, the peas have started to disintegrate. They've been on for about 3/4 of an hour, so we'll give them about another 1/4 of an hour, by which time they should be completely soft and ready to puree. Apicius tells us to stir them, and that's how we turn them into a puree. If your peas haven't turned into a nice puree at the end of the hour, just give them a bit longer. The next thing we have to do is to put them in cold water to cool. You couldn't do that with a pottery cooking pot, but it's fine with a pan. A pottery cooking pot would break with the contrasting temperatures. If you change the water several times, that will help to bring the temperature down. Shell the eggs. Separate the yolks and the whites. Chop the whites. Chop the onion. In the ingredients I put a small mild onion or a bunch of spring onions, but I've been lucky enough to find a Spanish onion, which is a really good type of mild onion, so I'm using a slice of that because Spanish onions are very large. That should be enough. Mash the egg yolk. It's easiest to do this with a fork. The Romans didn't have forks, so the best they could do is put it through a sieve, which is much harder work, but I'm using a fork because we have them. And then we stir our peas round again. And we season them with oil, a bit of oil, a dash of wine vinegar, and a bit of salt. And stir those round well. Then we stir in the chopped egg white and the onion. And then we transfer it all to the serving dish. Smooth it down put the egg yolk over the top. We top it all off with a little green oil, which is the oil produced by pressing green olives, and it stays nice and green with a strong grassy peppery taste for several months. This is actually rather old, so it's actually lost some of that grassy peppery flavour.